Hey guys, welcome back to the show. We actually just got done recording this week's episode, but we had some technical glitches and a couple of false starts. So just a quick note at the top of the show, apologies. We had to stitch some video together, getting all three of our feeds to work because we did have a special guest this week. Howie has joined us to talk about his recent African safari, which was an incredible trip. Definitely been on my bucket list for a while. A couple of housekeeping notes that hit the cutting room floor with video problems. First off, big thanks to Thrifty Traveler for being our sponsor again. If you're not signed up for Thrifty Traveler, they have some incredible travel deals that can help you save on both cash fares and points and miles fares. I actually had some friends use a couple of their deals this week. There was a premium economy deal for just a little bit over 50,000 miles round trip to Europe, including some summer travel. Premium economy, to me, is actually a great way to get back from Europe because those are almost all daytime flights. I prefer a business class seat on the way to Europe. And there were Amsterdam and Paris were destinations this week for business class fares, available via points. So plenty of good deals out there to be had if you know where to look. The yearly subscription of Thrifty Traveler, we can save you $10 on that using the code GO10 at thriftytraveler.com. Also, too, if you haven't signed up yet for the Slack community, great way to connect with us in a more meaningful way. We have happy hours almost every week of the year, a handful of meetups, a bunch of channels in Slack where you can talk to me and other travel experts, help get your questions answered, and interface with the rest of the community there. Lastly, we are going to have some giveaways coming up shortly on some fun stuff. Still just working out some details on that stuff, but just wanted to give you guys a quick rundown of why you might see a little bit of a hop in the video from this week. We didn't want to re-record all the great stuff that Howie shared with us, so apologies for this brief intro, and hope you guys have a great time watching the episode.
Climb aboard. This is the Miles to Go podcast. And now here's your host, Ed Pizza.
Hey guys, welcome back to the Miles to Go podcast. We are starting the show with Richard running across the room to get a bottle of Topo Chico so he can be like our guest, Howie Rappaport, who I'm going to introduce in just a moment. But Mr. Kerr, way to be a professional podcaster. I love the way you can stick the landing every single time.
You mean that I was one on time 25 minutes ago?
It's a fair statement. And while we want to get into the fact that Howie was very late, we're not going to get into it because now we all have work schedules and stuff like that.
I'm pretty sure he was talking to somebody in 18 different countries and 3 assistants trying to rearrange some travel for somebody that makes more money than we'll ever see in our life. That's probably what he was doing.
No, you already said what he was doing. He was out on the tarmac vectoring in some breeze planes.
Yeah.
with those very special headphones. And he has decided to take a break from that to talk African safari with us. So for folks that don't know, Howie has been in the community for, as long as I can recall, which was roughly before Kerr was born. Chicago seminars, luxury travel agent,
1 mile
at a time. Like, what else is on the resume that we did mention, Howie?
Award wallet, Rewardsmith.
Award wallet, did that for a bit.
BlackBerry Forums.
Man, we're going old school here. I did come from a previous life of mobile tech sales, so I've got a tech background.
Oh, you sold flip phones. I like it.
Flip phones and the BlackBerry and all those shenanigans. So I don't know how that turned into doing this kind of stuff. But
Howie is the one who brought me into the world of technology. If you don't know, I used to be one of the least technologically capable individuals. But Howie, let me tell you what I did yesterday. We had a member running into a point transfer problem, and I recognized that it was probably because their device token had expired and they were not being served the OTP prompt. So I had them go through a different flow, which I knew would trigger the OTP prompt. They entered their code, that fixed it, and then they could transfer points. And I did that all by myself yesterday. So look at the progress Howie has made here.
And with that story, we have now lost 20% of the viewership of the show. All right. After some brief technical glitches, we are back. Mr. Kerr is laughing because he has now instructed Howie how to use a microphone. So, a little bit of housekeeping here. If you want to text the show or leave us a voicemail, 571-293-6659. If you want to find us on social media, if TikTok still exists when this comes out, that's at the Miles to Go podcast on both TikTok and Instagram. He is at Kerr Points. I am at Pizza in Motion. And Howie has like 17 E's in one of his social handles, and we'll throw that up on the screen down below as well. So
you should also follow his doorbell cam. It's actually more entertaining than his personal.
Fact.
Yeah. What is that? What's the handle for the doorbell?
It is If This Door Could Talk.
Yeah, it's pretty great. It's right in the Savannah Historical District and captures all the entertaining things the tourists do walking by his house. It's pretty great.
Every Amazon delivery that exists out there. All right.
Yeah.
Well, so this story sort of starts with what we think was a mistake by Marriott releasing a bunch of Masai Mara inventory, which is a fairly upscale property in Africa that a lot of us miles and points nerds have always wanted to visit, but it was always way too many points. And I'm guessing that's what led you down the road to book your recent safari trip.
That is correct. So the idea of actually being able to use points and miles for a safari was extremely attractive. I've been on 2 before the most recent one, and I don't want to say we were frugal, but we were cost conscious on previous safaris. Safaris can be as cheap as $100 a day if you want to sleep in an actual tent, or $3,000-$4,000 a day per person.
Also still in a tent, but just a very nice one.
Right, also still in a tent, exactly. But when you wake up, you've got a bottle of Krug, and of course your caviar with your, breakfast in the morning and lobster tails and all those shenanigans.
Somewhere around there, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. This did all come up due to Marriott award availability at the JW Marriott Masai Mara. I think the only other place that you may be able to do a safari with quote-unquote points, not using something like Capital One where you could just wipe out a charge type thing, might be Richard Branson's properties.
Yep, can do that.
So there's a couple of Virgin properties that you might be able to do it, but that's it as of now. On this safari, actually spoke to several people, and there are a bunch of properties opening up in the next couple of years that will accept points and are more focused on that. So that's good news from the perspective of actually being able to redeem points. But as of now, very few options, and Masai Mara was an excellent deal.
Because it's not just the room, right? They include, what's included in the point redemption.
So let me talk about what's included and then what's not included, because it's not like you're just driving down the road and you're there. Right? So
yeah.
No.
Which part of Africa are we in?
Right, exactly. Right. So we're in Kenya, and we are about an hour and 15-minute flight west of Nairobi in Masai Mara. And so I'll talk about the logistics of getting there. But first, let's start with what's included with the Marriott redemption. So the redemption will include multiple game drives per day. So you'll have a morning game drive and typically an evening game drive. All of your meals are included: breakfast, lunch, dinner. All of your beverages, including alcohol, is included. The exception is typically going to be higher-end wines and champagnes. They're not going to be included, but Coors Light aplenty.
In Africa, no less.
Oh, yeah.
All right.
Yeah. And plenty of the local bubbly water served in glass. Excellent. And if you stay at a Marriott property and you do a points redemption and you book 5 nights, the 5th night is free. So that was excellent as well. Our rate that we paid was 80,000 points per night with the 5th night free. So for a total of 320,000 Bonvoy points, the cash equivalent running at the time that I booked, which was July of last year for a stay in April of this year, 2024, cash was running at about 3,200 a night, and our net was 80,000 points per night, well, minus the 5th night free, so 320,000 points for 5 nights. Do the math. Good luck beating that on a Bonvoy redemption.
Yeah, and just for perspective, looking at the rates right now, if I scroll out through the months, you're looking at when it is available, you're looking at rates of 150,000 points a night. Now, there's some pretty tragic stuff that's happened from a weather perspective there right now. We're not sure when Masai Mara is going to be open again, but typically you're looking at prices that are going to be at least double what you spent.
And I think it's important to call out, I still think that's a good value.
Yeah, okay. I mean, I think it can be. Because you've helped me understand how expensive safaris can be if you want to do it, not on a budget. If you want to have, a luxurious experience, put it that way.
So other things that are not included, your spa's not included, and gratuities are not included, right? So those are your additional expenses. Now, you've got to get to the lodge. So from Nairobi, it's an hour or so flight. Round trip airfare was about $400 a person. You're on a small prop plane landing on a dirt field. The lodges are all there to pick people up. And then you've got to get to Masai Mara from the strip. The JW Masai Mara from the Strip was about a 40-minute drive, but you're in the reserve at that point. So you are driving by elephants, lions, whatever it is, they're all there. The other thing that's not included is the park fee. So just to be in the Mara, there's an entrance fee. Up until this year, so through 2023, it was $50 US per person per day. The first half of 2024, it's $100 US per person per day. The second half of 2024, it's $200 US per person per day.
Yikes.
So the reasoning for this is they are actually just trying to limit access to the reserve. They know people will pay if they want to get in, and it's a mechanism to make sure that it doesn't get overrun with tourism and destroy the Mara. That's the point behind it.
That doesn't make any sense to me. If people are dropping that much money to go all the way on African safari, they think $100 a day is going to stop people. That's a money grab. That's not. That's
but 200 might start to,
them.
because then 200 might start to, because then you're talking about tagging on $1,000 to a 5-day trip.
Yeah,
per person.
Help me understand the actual layout of this property. It's not like a Tower JW property where you walk and there's the lobby. Like, what is the actual layout of this thing? Because I've seen the pictures and whatnot, and I still don't understand what you're walking into.
So it's very much open concept everything. There's no closed buildings necessarily. So when you first get to the property, you walk across a bridge. You're onto the property then. You're in the reserve, right? So animals can very easily just walk up. There's no fences surrounding the property. So you could have a giraffe, a hippo, an elephant just walk through property. Each of the units are individual buildings. And while they are quote unquote tented, they are permanent structures. So by tented, the roof is a tent. There's everything but air conditioning, right? So there's ceiling fans, there's electricity, there's Wi-Fi, there's hot water, there's plumbing, wood floors, tile floors. Everything is there. Like all of the amenities are there except for air conditioning. Open up the windows, and by the windows, it's just a zipper to zip down the protection from the screen that is your siding. But it is a permanent structure, and each unit is individual.
How hot was it with no AC?
Honestly, I was afraid, but it was not bad. With the ceiling fan and another fan they had in the room, it was perfectly fine. And it was mid 70s to low 80s for the most part during the day. But you've got to keep in mind how close you are to the equator. So there's so much direct sun hitting you. I got burned one day, learned my lesson, didn't listen to my wife, right? Fine. Right, we know how that works. But the air overall was not bad. Both of my previous safaris, we stayed in buildings that had air conditioning. Similar setup where we had our own individual building, but it was air conditioned. I would not tell someone to not go because of the lack of air conditioning. I was able to sleep comfortably every night, and at home I have air conditioning and 2 fans in my bedroom every night. So if I can make it happen, anyone can make it happen.
Where else have you done safari in Africa besides here?
So my 2 previous safaris were in South Africa, in the Sabi Sands Game Reserve, which abuts the Kruger National Park in South Africa.
Okay.
So key difference between going to these 2 locations. Sabi Sands is a public reserve, right? The government owns the land. It's not actually government owned, it's Mara owned, but it is government supported, as opposed to Sabi Sands, which is a private game reserve. It's owned and the land is owned by private lodges. So the big difference in the game experience is in Sabi Sands, you've got to realize that the lodge you're staying at is going to dictate where you're going to be able to go in the reserve. Do the lodges give access to the land where the animals may be? And so it's very important to stay at a lodge that has access to other parts of the reserve. There's a lot of mutual agreements as far as, right, I will allow my Jeeps on your property, you allow yours on mine. But there's also limitations where maybe this one landowner will say, okay, you can have 1 Jeep per day on our property. So if in the morning, 1 Jeep goes out, sees this fantastic things with lions and all these, lions attacking a Cape buffalo, wonderful. In the afternoon, there's something great going on, but a Jeep has already been there from your lodge. You can't go. As opposed to in the Mara, because it's one giant public area, you can go anywhere.
Mm-hmm.
But then the difference is, do you have to stay on the roads? Can you go off-roading? So there's different rules that'll be in place. But I think the important thing is to kind of understand the access rights that you would have in the Mara versus in like a private reserve like Sabi Sands.
So for folks that don't know, a lot of these trips are going to involve, some sort of a intermediary stay, if you will, once you get to Africa in terms of flight timing connections from the U.S. You've got long flights to get there. You can defray some of those costs because the major hotel brands do have properties in Africa, even if they're not necessarily, part of some of these, wonderful safari locations. For a long time, the great deal was the Protea hotels from Marriott. Marriott has, I looked it up while we were talking, Marriott has over 100 hotels in Africa. Hilton has about 50, and Hyatt has 20-something right now. I would imagine that as they add Mr. and Mrs. Smith's properties, that number may come up a bit, but whether those are good redemptions or not. Did you guys stay somewhere before you got to Masai Mara?
Yeah, so all of the properties we stayed at were points-eligible properties. I paid cash for some, but points for others. So we flew from New York on a redemption with Aegean Airlines.
Mm-hmm.
Had a whole bunch of Aegean miles back when it made sense to credit them and get 3 checked bags on United at 70 pounds apiece. It was back helping my brother. So we had a whole bunch of Aegean miles. They gave away
status to pretty much everybody for a long time.
And Star Alliance Gold, fantastic.
Mm-hmm.
We redeemed 55,000 Aegean miles per person and about $200 in taxes from JFK to Nairobi on Ethiopian.
In business class?
In business class. And then we stayed at the Crown Plaza Nairobi Airport. Fantastic property. People were amazing. The food at the hotel was amazing. Just a convenient location, just because it's right there within the airport complex. Redeemed, I think it was 26,000 IHG points per room. I got upgraded to a suite both times, so that was fantastic.
Nice.
And then after the Mara, we went down to Cape Town in South Africa. We stayed downtown in the city for a couple of nights at the Hyatt Regency.
Mm-hmm.
It was recently changed from a Category 2 to a Category 1. I believe that is an appropriate categorization. The property is dated. It is dated. The people were fantastic. Location was good for a bunch of stuff we were doing. The people were fantastic, but the property is dated. The adage of you can never have too many outlets in a hotel room. I think there were 2 accessible outlets in the entire 2-bedroom suite. No outlets in the bathroom.
That's the reason Howie is his own traveling Radio Shack when he's going somewhere. He's got more cords and extension cords. He's got everything he needs for the 2 outlets.
Extension cords aplenty.
Yeah.
And then speaking about the Protea properties, we actually went to wine country for a couple nights after and stayed at the Protea in Franschhoek. Not a fancy property by any mean, but perfect location. People are great value. We paid cash, a little over $200 a night, but we had a 2-bedroom condo, which again, I was traveling with my mother. It was perfect. We had her each own bedrooms, and then we had a great living and kitchen area. So definitely able to use points and miles throughout the trip. And the fact that we were able to do it with Safari kind of was the cherry on top.
Am I remember right that Protea is leaving Bonvoy? You're not going to be able to redeem points anymore?
I thought they were already leaving, and I just looked up, and they're still in the Marriott program. So I thought I had heard that as well, and I'm just not seeing that represented on their website. So because there wasn't there one Protea property, maybe it was near Kruger, that was like a Category 1, and you weren't in Kruger, but you were like right outside it, and so it was an awesome deal, and I thought that was going away.
It is, as of September 1st, 2022, that specific Protea Hotel Kruger Gate is no longer part of Marriott Bonvoy.
Okay, all right, because when I searched Protea hotels, I came up with 6 or 7, so that hotel's not a part of it. That makes more sense. So you mentioned flying Ethiopian. As somebody who's less knowledgeable about Africa and safaris, because I haven't done a safari yet, the things I hear consistently as well, that Cape Town and Joburg are popular places for people to try to use miles to get into Africa, and that Lufthansa has a lot of flights through their hub in Germany. Is that your experience, both in booking safaris for yourself and for others?
Award availability, every time I have looked when trying to plan in advance, has been near impossible to pretty much everything in South Africa, whether it's Cape Town or Joburg. And when I say, impossible, sure, if you're going to spend 800,000 sky miles, one way, fantastic. You're great.
I think that's the rate for Detroit to LA now, but sure.
That would be in main cabin or Comfort Plus.
Yeah.
So it was difficult. And when planning it, right, it was first get the safari locked in and then figure out whatever we could do for flights. So I was looking at literally every option on the East Coast. Mom was coming from Massachusetts. I'm coming from Savannah, Georgia. Anywhere we could meet on the East Coast to make our way to Kenya we were doing. And it just lucked out that there was award availability on Ethiopian. Biggest challenge with Ethiopian is they've got a ton of configurations, and most likely you're going to end up with one of their older 222 configurations in business. It's fine. Don't get me wrong, right? Flatbed seat, that's what I care about. We both got a decent amount of sleep on those flights, but you're not going to get a 350 with a 121 configuration in business. Food was fantastic, right? No problems with the food. The service was fantastic on everything. No complaints there.
How's the transit experience in Addis Ababa? My sister did that earlier this year or last summer. She said it was a bit chaotic.
It was interesting. The transit experience is you get into a giant terminal. We landed at, I think, about 8 o'clock. And I mean, this was as busy as any domestic U.S. airport on a Thursday evening. It was packed, people everywhere, all these flights going out. The one thing that was nice with Ethiopian is they had a business class boarding area. So, which was right outside of their lounge, and they've got special seating. It's all roped off. And what they do is they will bus you out to the plane, and it's just for business class passengers. They call it. They've got specific buses. Everybody else has to make their way out to wherever the boarding gates are, but business class passengers just go to this one location about 50 feet out at the front of the lounge. I think the biggest challenge with that airport, no air conditioning.
Yeah.
Doesn't get too warm there, though, right?
Yeah. No. Especially 9 o'clock at night, humid. No issue. Same challenge with Nairobi Airport. No air conditioning. 5:30 in the morning, right? Not the greatest. A little sticky.
That's exactly what I like before a 12-hour flight home. Be a little hot and sticky. Man.
Based on your...
I was going to say, every aircraft did have individual air vents. That was...
Clutch.
That is huge.
That is the downside of flying a European carrier down to Africa is you're dying the entire flight, and when you get off, you're just going to keep sweating because you've just been hot forever until you get to that cold airport hotel shower.
If you were to pick a time that was best to go to Africa or times, when are the best times to book for a safari? What months are best to be there?
Based on my experience and in talking with a couple of folks at the lodge, specifically in talking with the guides and the rangers, March, April, and October, November are fantastic times. Reason is they're shoulder seasons. Mm-hmm. You're avoiding big holidays. You're avoiding, if you're in the Mara, you're avoiding the migrations that are happening. Stand a better chance at more reasonable pricing. And it's like the animals are going away. They live there.
Yeah.
Right. So logistically, you're not going to have necessarily a different experience. There's no real summer versus winter. It's more wet versus dry. And those shoulder seasons are reasonably good. Also, from a pricing perspective, you're going to get more favorable pricing regardless in those seasons. So that's my suggestion to go if you're ever thinking about going.
Yeah, I pulled up just a couple of pages real quick, and I haven't clicked through all the dates. Some of these are erroring out, but I pulled up Newark to Cape Town and Newark to Nairobi, just picking, two randoms on United and searching for Saver Award inventory. And I did find a smattering of dates into Cape Town. Most of them were double connections. So Newark to Dulles, Dulles to Cape Town. Sorry, not Newark to Dulles, Dulles to Addis, Addis to Cape Town. So not a great itinerary, but that was 88,000 United miles, which I would regard as a reasonable deal. And then for Nairobi, there's like 15 dates on their flexible search calendar that says that it's available for 88,000. About half of those I clicked on while we were talking came up with errors. So there is discount inventory out there, but it can be tough to find.
Yeah, Ethiopian was the one airline that seemed to have availability across multiple dates. I was looking at really anything that was just going to be a one-stop that would go from the U.S. down to South Africa or something like that. Couldn't find anything either way, whether going down or coming back, right? We would have change the trip around and the timing based on, what was available, but it worked out to go into Kenya first.
I think I would check out Turkish's own program to connect through Istanbul, and then the Middle East 3 to get, if you happen to be in one of those cities that they start here in the U.S., to check out whether you can go through Doha, Abu Dhabi, or Dubai. There seems to be a lot of success there, relatively speaking.
And cash prices are not horrible if you're flexible on dates, especially in economy. I mean, I'm not going to do an economy with points and miles, but they're reasonable prices. Our flight back was a paid ticket, and it was just under $2,000 per person one way in business with one stop. So we did Cape Town, Amsterdam, New York. Reasonable for that on the date that we specifically wanted. So couldn't complain about that.
I'm seeing $900 round trip from Atlanta to Nairobi, second half of this year.
Oh,
in economy.
That's a no for me.
It's one stop through Paris to go for $900, right? If you're just looking to get there, then that's not a bad deal to fly a round trip to Africa, one stop.
I don't disagree with you, but that's a lot of coach. And I'm allergic. So let's zoom out a bit and look at the whole trip and give folks that are listening or watching an idea of what you think is a reasonable budget for a safari. And I know you said you've done it budget and you've done it with points and you've done and paid for some stuff. Let's talk about something that's reasonable for somebody who's approachable, but it's not like, I'm going to spend a week at Masai Mara, paying cash, because we know that's going to be out of the reach of most of the folks listening to the show, including everybody on this screen.
Yeah, I think if you look at it just from a cash perspective, you can find a very nice lodge where you will have all the amenities you want, including air conditioning. You're not going to get air conditioning in the Mara. Everything is tented there. So that's just not going to happen. But give you an example of South Africa. You can find a great experience with everything included on the ground there for $600 to $700 per person per day. Mm-hmm. That's not to say that you can't have an excellent experience for $200 per person per day, but I'm talking about you don't have to think about a thing when you're there. Your rangers are going to take you everywhere. You're going to have multiple game drives a day. All of your meals are included. There's no logistics you need to worry about other than just getting there. So that's completely viable. The first trip we did, it was under $500 per person per day. The second one we did was about $700 per person per day. We stepped up to, kind of a higher end accommodation. But you definitely don't need to worry about spending the additional money. I really think the focus needs to be on where you're going and the access that lodge has to. Don't spend money to stay at a fancy place because you want granite countertops and you want high-end champagne. Most important thing on safari is seeing the animals. So that's, I think, the key thing to keep in mind is look at what the experience is going to look like. Don't necessarily look at the amenities. So that $500 to $700 a night range, you can have an excellent experience and not break the bank. And then the logistics of getting in and out of the property, right? Assume another $300 to $500 per person based on if you're going to fly in or if you've got to do like a 3-hour ground transfer.
Right.
And then your flights, right? So, you saw right there, you can do economy for $1,000. Business class, I actually just booked 4 people from Atlanta down to Cape Town. All in price in business was just over $17,000. So under $5,000 per person round trip in business class from the U.S. to South Africa. Again, if you can find the availability, I think that's a great price for the amount of flying that you're doing. But keep points and miles in mind, of course.
With your lifetime titanium Bonvoy status, which we don't know why both of you have that for some reason. Rest in peace, Starwood. What benefits did you get on property? Free breakfast. Do they have upgrades? Are there desirable tents over the other one? What did you get for that?
There are upgrades available. The perks that we got these very nice scarves, which are like...
Just not what I expected you to say at all.
Not what I'd expect. But when you're out on a game drive and your ranger's driving 30 miles an hour and it's bumpy and it's windy and it's now 50 degrees, it's pretty helpful when you've got the blanket on and then that as well. And then my mother got a tote bag. So your status isn't really doing much for you because everything's already included. But honestly, I think that's kind of nice because, it's not a huge property. There's not going to be a lot of upgrade options regardless. And it gives anyone a chance to go and have a good experience. So I kind of like it from that perspective.
How democratic that's going to use use some other words, but how polite of you.
Yeah, I mean, just running some point me searches while we were talking, it seems to me that if you were trying to line up and pick the best currencies to be able to transfer and have access to reasonable business class opportunities, I would say in order of priority, it would probably be Chase Ultimate Rewards, and then probably a tie between Cap One and American Express membership rewards from what I'm seeing. Because I do see, just looking at October, November of this year, and then a little bit of early part of next year, that it does seem like there's more Star Alliance saver availability, and a lot of the stuff I'm seeing on Air France or KLM is 160,000 and above, one way in business class, and you're paying. So like these flights I'm looking at here, it's a $400 copay, where the United combinations of United and Ethiopian, not only are you consistently less total miles, but they're typically $8 in fees on the outbound. Now, it's probably more on the way back. I didn't check that, but you can easily save a few $100 a person trying to focus on some of the Star Alliance carriers.
Yeah. And if you're going to South Africa, if you like wine and you want to do a little city exploration, my itinerary that is now my go-to and has worked out really well for us multiple times, and everyone that I've booked on it has loved it, is go into Cape Town, spend a couple of days in the city, acclimate to the time zone, deal with jet lag, have some good food, explore a little bit, go do safari. So you'd then go from the West Coast all the way over to the East Coast, get over to Kruger, Sabi Sands, and then come back and spend 3 or 4 nights in wine country, so you can recap the safari, relax a little bit, have a little bit of that vacation, and kind of decompress after the fact. It's a great itinerary. I like it. And I was able to come back with 24 bottles of wine. So
wow.
Worked out okay.
True Howie fashion right there. He's got actually both of you guys have great wine collections. You guys are really similar. This is why I hang out with both of you.
I don't have either the light sticks or the headphones to be able to vector a plane into a gate, though, so I'm going to work on that.
If you're listening in the car, Howie has hearing protection on today instead of earphones, so you should go check out the YouTube channel.
We'll see if we can just tweet out some screenshots too of the beautiful headphones. I know, Mr. Kerr, you've got some deadlines coming up. Do you have time to help share how you won $1 off of both Howie and I this week?
I do, and I think payment's still outstanding from Piazza Relio.
Do I have you on Venmo?
But yes, I am number 5,897 in the current Disney queue, so these random queue placements I never seem to have much luck with, so we'll see how that goes. Yeah, this is for a Moonlight Magic registration, if you're familiar, if you speak the Disney. Yes, it's time for ladies and gentlemen, it's time for Stories with Uncle Dick and the return of Frontier Tales here to the Miles to Go podcast. I love Frontier Tales. I love the Frontier experience. Never fails to excite and ignite all the wonders of the mind. So Thomas, Mary, and I flew home for $29 each 2 days ago now from Disney, from Orlando, for a last-minute jaunt that we had planned. I'm always watching the inbound flight for Frontier. This was one of the last flights for this plane for a day. Bit of a risk given Frontier's operational reliability, and it was coming from Punta Cana back to Atlanta and then Atlanta to Orlando. Things can just go screwy with Frontier international flights because there's no spare crew or aircraft and everybody's kind of everywhere, but everything was on time. Actually, it was the first time we've done like this, do the whole full park day and then fly home at night, so you're just in your bed and done with the travel. Big fan of it, watching the plane all day. Hey, looks like we're going to be on time. Get to the airport, it's super chill, it's a Tuesday night. Usually Orlando's a bit of a mess, but nobody was there. The club at MCO was still horribly mediocre and full. But nonetheless, it is a lounge. We board. I'm not trying to jinx it by saying anything. And then we push back from the gate like 10 minutes early. And I text Howie and Ed, and I'm like, an early Frontier flight. And as Wi-Fi was dying on the takeoff roll, they were both like, and then sure enough, ladies and gentlemen, we had the smoothest flight in the world. We had row 3. Our bags were right above us in the overhead seats. The flight was maybe half full. We got, I'm catching up on Poldark if you're a fan of that show, which you should download. It's a pretty great show.
Never heard of that one. Shockingly.
We land 38 minutes early, and I am like, this is wonderful, except in the back of my mind, I'm like, except there's probably not going to be a gate. And you know what? 1 hour and 8 minutes later, we finally pull in to our gate. And as soon as we landed and we parked in the taxiway that's in between both of the left active runways at Atlanta, and you hear those engines shut down, I was like, oh boy, here we go. So I texted Howie and said, hey, over under 20 minutes waiting for a gate. They both took the under. I almost set the over under at 45 minutes. I think you would both. I really didn't think it was going to be good. And sure enough.
45, I definitely take the under. And by the way, just for clarity, I went back on our text thread and you texted an early Frontier departure. And I said, jinx, don't F with the aviation gods.
Yeah, and I did. But I'll tell you, here's the part you guys haven't heard yet, and where I got a little bit, or maybe, no, you guys did. We did recast this over text. I got frustrated, and probably the sternest I've ever talked to a flight crew in my adult life. So we're sitting there, and I have a 7 and a 9-year-old, and we're waiting for 45 minutes on the tarmac, and Mary's been telling me she's got to go to the bathroom. And the flight attendants, a couple people have tried to get up, and they're the hawks on the PA. Ladies and gentlemen, we're on an active taxiway. Sit down right now. And I was like, oh boy, here we go. So at 45 minutes, we've now taxied off of the active runway. We're in between the terminals, so we are in no immediate, like we're not going anywhere. There's nothing about to happen. So I get up with Mary and I'm like, hey, she's been holding it. She's got to go. And the flight attendant is like, no, we're on an active taxiway. And I was like, ma'am, the 7-year-old is going to the bathroom. Like I was very stern and direct, like, and she said, okay, I have to call the pilot. And I was like, okay. And then under her breath, she goes, you're just delaying us getting to the gate. And I was like, no, I'm not. Like, I'm absolutely not. We're not going anywhere. There's no gate. The pilot hadn't said anything. So the 7-year-old goes to the bathroom, and I'm just irritated at this point because, like, there's just no reason to do this to a 7-year-old. Right after this, people have obviously been holding this for like a while. Like 3 people get up, and the flight attendants are like, no, you're going to have to sit down. And this 13-year-old kid was like, I have to go. And the flight attendant looks at him and says, no, sit down. Like, what are we doing at this point with our lives where, again, there's a right way for these flight attendants to handle that, and there's a wrong way. There's also, I've seen captains do this before. After about the 50-minute mark of sitting there, they'll turn the seatbelt sign off and say, hey, we don't see the plane in front of us pushing back. Everybody, if you got to use the lavatory, you got 5 minutes right now because we know these guys haven't even started the pushback or the engine start, so we're not going anywhere. These guys never said anything. The 13-year-old's mom, who, ladies and gentlemen, she was a larger individual than I am. She was like 6'4". She went up to the flight attendant. She was like, my child has to use the bathroom and he is going. And this flight attendant, again, just in the most rude, flippant way, grabs the PA and she's like, okay, but you're delaying us getting to the gate, and calls the pilot, who doesn't care because like 3 seconds after this, the kids finally go to the bathroom and we start departing to the gate. And I'm just so irritated by this whole, like, what do you want people to do? Like, there's old people, there's little kids here. Why are you guys being so rude about this? Like, just, we're not out anywhere near the runways. So the Frontier tells, do it again. Completely understand, but I found the way that they were so rude and handle this, and just, we're telling a 7-year-old, no, you can't go to the bathroom after almost an hour of waiting, is like, okay, we've officially lost our minds here. Like, let's just go back.
Are you leaving out the part of the story where you were then met at the gate by 2 of Atlanta's finest?
I thought about this afterward.
You want to watch this now?
We joked about this, right? Is if the flight, if after I made direct eye contact and said the 7-year-old is going to the bathroom, like if after this the flight attendant had chosen to pick a fight, at that point reality no longer matters. I am now creating an issue with flight crew, and I could very well get in trouble. And
you're disobeying orders,
and it doesn't matter like what happens. And like that is just really, it just got me even more irritated as we talked about, because it's true, I could have very well gotten in trouble for quote unquote picking a fight with the flight attendant, and then we would have given our statements, and either way our statements would have ended up with me in handcuffs because I disobeyed a flight crew, right? And that's like the reality of where we're at, because my 7-year-old has to go. So like that got super irritating. However, it was $29 for us to get home, and stuff happens, and I was happy to spend an hour of my time instead of paying $307 per person or whatever Delta wanted for that flight. So in the end, all is well. I just like, let's use our common sense here, ladies and gentlemen, and let the 7-year-olds and whoever else has to go to the bathroom go to the bathroom on a plane after you've been sitting on the ground for an hour. So that the return of Frontier Tales never fails here at Miles to Go.
When do you think we'll have our next Frontier Tale? Do you have any other trips planned on?
It's just like a running joke in the family now. I tell Thomas and Emily, hey, I got us, $29 Frontier flights now. They both look at me and they go, yeah. Even Thomas is like, Dad, I don't know about this. I'm like, dude, it was $29 and only cost us an extra hour and almost a change of clothes. So like, it's a good deal. Like, it's still
teach them while they're young that their time has no value.
No, it's still a good deal. The actual flight itself and leaving early was fantastic. And then, final part of this was as we did finally pull up to the gate, the captain said that the Delta plane that had our gate had taken a mechanical, and that's why we couldn't pull into a gate. And Frontier obviously doesn't have any spare gates. But I'll be honest, I had no idea that Delta and Frontier share gates at Atlanta. And we were in the E terminal, which does from time to time have low cost carriers, but I didn't know that. So you learn something every day in your home airport.
I didn't either. Like, I always considered E gates to be sort of like the wayward stepchildren, and then the rest of Frontier is what? T gates, right?
Yep. Well, no, D is a traditional low-cost carrier. Frontier has recently taken over a gate in T, and now they also have E. So you don't really know where you're going, and apparently neither does Frontier.
And if you're not familiar with Atlanta, the difference between T and E in terms of transit time,
it's like,
even if you use the train and time everything perfectly, is probably still 15 minutes.
Yeah, still another. It was a long evening getting home after a full park day, but we had fun nonetheless. And I knew I had a good story for this week's podcast.
And you made $2.
I did. I made $2, and I'm still number 5,218 in line here with Disney. So plenty all the time in the world.
Well, and you've actually made the $2 because apparently when I looked on Venmo, it said that some very long time ago. Let's see, how long ago was this?
I just got a friend request from Ed Pizzarello on Venmo. I didn't know you
January 24th, 2022, Richard Kerr paid you with the quote, "Mickey wants his blood money." So there you go.
Sounds about right. I didn't know you could send friend requests on Venmo. Why is it a social network? I didn't know that. But there you go.
Well, I just want to be friends with you, Mr. Kerr. I've been trying for quite some time. So I am trying again. All right, Mr. Howie, push Richard off of the soapbox and spend a minute telling people if they're looking to plan a safari trip, how you can take off the headphones and help them.
I'll probably keep the headphones on because it's just safer that way. I'll wear my orange vest next time.
That would be good. It would definitely look better for the people not watching.
Best place to find me on the internet is if you just go to rewardsmith.com, REWARD Smith.com. It'll send a link to my Virtuoso page, and you can contact me. All my info's there. But I think the key thing with Safari is really just figuring out what you want the experience to be. Like, what's the most important thing? Because different animals are going to be in different locations. I think that's kind of a really important thing to call out. Sabi Sands, we saw a whole bunch of rhinos and a rhino family and had them walk right by us. And when we were in the Mara, the closest we got to a rhino was 500 yards. Thankfully, we had binoculars, and that was that. Right? There's only about 20 rhino in the entire Mara. So I think, the focus is really what kind of animals do you want to do? Do you want to do gorillas and chimps, and you're going to go to Uganda or possibly Rwanda? Is it all about the lions or elephants or whatever it happens to be? So I think that's kind of the key thing, is figure out what experience you want. And honestly, I would encourage everyone to do it because it really is like taking a kid to Disney for the first time. And, as Disney nerds, I think the two of you can appreciate the feeling that you get every time you go back, and taking someone that hasn't been. It was fantastic to be able to do that with my mother, and I don't think it'll ever get old. So, I think it's, everyone will say, oh, it's a once in a lifetime type thing. And it can absolutely be a once in a lifetime type trip, but it can be done reasonably, especially if you don't want to go spend on granite countertops and Krug every morning.
This granite countertops is a sticking point with you. There's got to be a story behind this. There's got to be a
It
story
is.
behind one of your clients who requires granite countertops.
I mean, I've seen photos, and I've seen some of these lodges, and I've seen some of the plunge pools, and I've seen the wine cellars that they have, and it's fantastic. And it's
count me
a great,
in for that. A plunge pool
it's a
after hot
great
day
way to
is-
spend money. Like, if we're trying to do Monty Brewster here and get through the $30 million he needs to do, fantastic. Absolutely.
Fantastic reference.
Go for it.
Okay.
Right.
I still have had trouble finding that movie streaming anywhere since one of the two of you mentioned it, so I might have to break down and buy it. But
Yeah.
Howie's being a little bit humble. He actually planned a pretty awesome trip for my business partner on, was it TCS?
TCS.
Around the world jet trip. So he has a vast amount of experience on very different types of travel. So if you're looking for somebody to help you out with this stuff, we will have his information up there somewhere on the screen, because that's what Jeremiah does. Meanwhile, Mr. Kerr, I heard you're booking some plane tickets. Does that mean you're going somewhere soon?
Yeah. Where am I going? We got a trip to Chicago coming up. We got a trip to New York coming up. We got a trip back to Orlando coming up. And then
Are we having a Vegas rendezvous?
That's the other place I've forgotten. Yeah, I'll see you in Vegas in a couple of weeks here. Yeah, so I'll kind of all over the place over the next few months. Even perhaps a little trip to Banff to get that off the bucket list to check it out.
One of my favorite places. My wife and I went there on what I didn't know at the time was called the Baby Moon, and it's an unbelievably beautiful place. Banff, if you're going to go, make sure you take a little jaunt up to Lake Louise at a bare minimum, and maybe even drive a little further to Jasper.
You didn't know it was a baby moon because you didn't know you were going to be a father, or you didn't know what a baby moon was?
The latter. Yeah,
Okay.
the latter. Yeah. And then they tried to tell us that we couldn't go on dog sledding because my wife was pregnant, and I
It's none of
had
their
to explain.
business.
I had to explain to them that my wife could bench press all of them, and that we were probably safer having her in the lead than me because she had just finished a marathon. So
They probably got pretty excited about that, actually. Oh, yeah? Should you prove it?
I do highly recommend the Fairmont Banff, one of my favorite hotels in the entire world, as well as there's a really awesome fondue restaurant in Fairmont Lake Louise where you can get pretty much any wild animal from up in that region and dunk it in a pot and,
I don't know if I'm excited about that or not.
Oh, yeah,
But
that's great. Yeah,
the Fairmont Banff is only
little moose.
$975 a night in June, so great news there. I will not be
Start
staying
saving
there.
up your Accor points.
Yeah, a lot of Accor points.
Well, as you mentioned, I do have my ticket to Vegas booked. I should probably book a hotel, so I'll work on that here soon. Off the road for a little bit while we deal with some family stuff, and then into graduation season for our daughter, and then off for summer travel as I try to piece together the last few legs of our Japan trip. Howie, thanks a bunch for joining us this week. Mr. Kerr, I hope you have safe travels in all of those wonderful places. Since I didn't tease it at the beginning, don't forget about our Slack community if you want to spend a couple of bucks joining us for happy hours. Richard was there on happy hour last night with Julian, so we had a couple of quote-unquote travel experts joining me for a pretty fun discussion. Lots of good discussions going on in there as well. And lastly, just a big thanks to our sponsor, Thrifty Traveler. I actually used 2 of their deals this week. Did you guys see the Belgium award flights that came out? I mean, that was a super deal. Tons and tons of availability. So this is one of those times a year where like you're not going to find a lot of award availability, in my opinion. Like summer travel at this point, a lot of it's dried up. So I'm surprised to still see some pretty awesome deals. I've seen an Air France deal, and I've seen a Star Alliance deal in the past 10 days for reasonable business class flights to Europe. I mean, that's a pretty big deal. Something I don't see very often. I don't know I would have caught either one of those without my Thrifty Traveler subscription. So if you haven't subscribed yet, you can sign up for an annual subscription with the code GO10 from us Miles to Go folks to save you $10 on that first year. Mr. Kerr, Mr. Rappaport, as always, good to see both of you. Until we upload again, we've got miles to go.
We don't ever prep. We just talk.